There are moments in life that split you in two, before and after. I remember the exact second I realized that the man I had given everything to, my time, my tears, my trust, my grief, had been using my most sacred wound as a weapon against me. I remember because I felt it in my chest first, not in my mind, in my chest, like something had been quietly pulled out of me while I was sleeping, and I only noticed when I reached for it and found nothing there. My name is Serena, and this is the story of how I loved a man through the darkest chapter of my life, and how that same man turned my darkness into a door he could walk through whenever he wanted something from me. My mother passed away 3 years ago, March. The kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, it gets inside your bones and stays there. She had been sick for 2 years before that, and those 2 years had slowly, quietly dismantled the version of me that knew how to laugh without thinking about it. I became a caregiver, a daughter on the edge of something I couldn't name, and eventually a grieving woman trying to remember who she was before loss became her whole identity. That's when Daniel came into my life. He was introduced to me through a mutual friend at a small dinner gathering. I wasn't even supposed to go that night. I remember standing in front of my closet for almost 20 minutes, telling myself I was too tired, too hollow, too not ready. But something pulled me out of that apartment. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was the universe setting up a lesson I hadn't yet earned the wisdom to understand. Daniel was charming, warm in that quiet way that feels earned rather than performed. He didn't come at me with loud compliments or rehearsed lines. He just listened. And when you have been surrounded by the noise of grief for so long, a person who simply listens feels like the most extraordinary gift in the world. We talked for 3 hours that night. I told him about my mother. I don't know why. I never talked about her to strangers, but something about Daniel made the walls come down before I even noticed they were falling. I told him about her laugh, the way she used to hum while cooking, how she called me her little sunrise every single morning until the very end. He held my hand across the table and said, "She sounds like she was everything." And I thought, this man understands the language of loss. What I didn't know that day was that he was already taking notes. We dated for almost 2 years. In the beginning, it was beautiful in that fragile, tender way that things are when you're healing and someone is there holding pieces of you together. Daniel was present. He remembered details, the anniversary of my mother's passing, the songs she loved, the little rituals I kept to feel close to her. He would sometimes leave a single yellow tulip on my kitchen counter without saying a word about it, just because. I fell in love with him the way broken people fall, completely and with both eyes closed. I moved in with him after 8 months. I told myself it was love, and it was, but looking back now, I can see something I couldn't see then. The more comfortable he became, the more he started using what he knew about me, quietly at first, like small tests to see how much he could get away with. A canceled plan dismissed with, "I know you've been emotional lately, maybe you just need rest." A lie covered with, "You're still grieving, sweetheart, you're not thinking clearly." And me, still carrying the weight of a woman I had buried, believing him. Because grief makes you doubt yourself. It makes you question whether the sadness you feel is real or manufactured. It makes you unsure of your own memory, your own reactions, your own worth. Daniel knew this. He had learned it from everything I had trusted him with, and slowly, carefully, like someone who had planned this from a distance, he began to use it. The first time I caught him in a real lie, I told myself I had misunderstood. He had told me he was working late on a Thursday. I believed him. I always believed him. But that same evening, a colleague of mine mentioned she had seen Daniel at a restaurant across town. A nice restaurant, the kind you go to when you want to impress someone, not the kind you go to alone. When I brought it up, gently, carefully, the way I had learned to bring up anything with him, like I was handling something that might shatter, he looked at me with those calm eyes and said, "Serena, you're doing this again. You get anxious when you're in one of your grief spirals. I was working. You just don't remember what I told you." I stood there in our kitchen, and I actually apologized. That is the moment I am most ashamed of, not because I was weak, but because I had been so thoroughly conditioned to question myself that I chose his version of reality over my own eyes. This happened again and again. Each time I found something, a message on his phone that felt wrong, a story that didn't line up, a receipt for something he never mentioned, he had a response ready. And that response always circled back to my grief, my mental state, my mother. You've never fully healed, Serena. Your mom's passing left you with trust issues. I've been patient, but this is a lot. I think you need to talk to someone, a therapist, because what you're doing right now isn't about me, it's about her. He turned my most sacred wound into a cage, and I lived inside it for months, questioning every instinct, silencing every alarm, telling myself that love meant endurance, that healing was messy, that maybe he was right and I was simply too broken to see clearly. But here's the thing about wounds that are real. They don't stay quiet forever. They speak. Sometimes in whispers, sometimes in a moment so undeniable that every wall you built around the truth comes down at once. Mine came down on a Sunday afternoon. I had gone to his apartment early, I still had a key, to leave something for him before he got home, a small gift, something tender and thoughtless the way love sometimes is. And on his laptop, left open on the dining table, was a conversation. Not hidden, not minimized, just open, as if the universe had decided I had waited long enough. It was with a woman named Priya. The messages went back 14 months. 14 months of lies, of a second life running parallel to mine, of conversations that made it clear she believed he was his girlfriend just as fully as I did. But it wasn't just the betrayal that broke me. It was one message in particular, one that made the air leave my lungs completely. Priya had asked him once, "Why does she stay? Why doesn't she leave or question you more?" And Daniel had written back, "Her mom died. She's fragile. She second guesses everything. Honestly, it makes things easier." I read that sentence 4 times, and then I sat down on his dining chair very quietly, and I felt something shift inside me that has never shifted back. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was clarity, the brutal, clean, devastating clarity of finally seeing something exactly as it is. He hadn't loved me through my grief. He had weaponized it. He had looked at a woman in pain and seen not a person to protect, but a vulnerability to exploit. I didn't cry. I took a photo of the screen, I picked up my things, I walked out of that apartment, and I locked the door behind me with a steadiness that surprised even myself. The storm was coming, but first, I needed to think. I want to be honest about something. When people say revenge, they imagine something loud, dramatic, a confrontation with screaming and tears and door slamming. But real justice, the kind that actually restores something in you, is quieter than that. It moves the way deep water moves. You don't always see it, but it gets everywhere. I spent 2 weeks doing something Daniel never expected me to do. I gathered myself. I spoke to a lawyer friend about the joint account we had started together, money I had contributed to for over a year. I contacted my bank. I quietly removed my name from his lease, which I had co-signed in a moment of trust I now understood had been engineered. I documented everything: the messages, the timeline, the financial contributions. And then I called Priya. Not to hurt her. She was a victim too, and I knew that. I called her because she deserved the truth as much as I did. I will never forget her silence on the phone when I told her who I was. The long, heavy pause. And then, very softly, "How long?" "2 years," I said. She had been with him for almost 3. We didn't become friends, exactly, but we became something. 2 women who had been used by the same man's careful architecture of lies, and who both deserved to walk away with their eyes open. We corroborated each other's timelines. We compared what we knew. And together, without ever raising our voices, we made sure the people in Daniel's life, his family, his colleagues, the world he had so carefully curated, knew exactly who he was. Not with cruelty, with truth. His older sister called me. She was devastated. She apologized on his behalf with the kind of genuine sorrow that made me realize even the people who loved Daniel had been living with a version of him that wasn't fully real. His mother, a kind woman who had met me twice at family gatherings, sent me a handwritten note. She said she was ashamed. She said my mother had raised a good woman. I held that note and cried for a long time. Not because I was broken, because I was finally, after everything, seen. Daniel tried to reach me twice, once through a message claiming he could explain, once through a mutual friend who arrived at my door with carefully scripted words about second chances. I didn't respond to either, not out of bitterness, but because there are some doors, once you understand what was on the other side of them, that you simply do not open again. The financial piece resolved itself over the following months. The money I was owed came back to me through channels that were slow and frustrating, but ultimately just. The lease situation untangled itself. These things always take longer than they should, but they resolve. What I want to tell you, what I most need to tell you, is what I learned about my mother in all of this. I had spent so long carrying guilt around her death, wondering if I had done enough, said enough, loved loudly enough while she was still here. And I had let that guilt become a doorway that Daniel walked through every time he needed me to doubt myself. But when I finally came out the other side of this, I understood something. My mother did not leave me broken. She left me layered. She gave me softness and grief and depth and the ability to love without conditions. Those aren't weaknesses. They are the most powerful things I carry. Daniel looked at my tenderness and saw something to exploit. But what he didn't understand, what people like him never understand, is that a woman who has survived real loss is not fragile. She has already stood at the edge of the worst thing and found a way to breathe. You cannot weaponize that kind of strength. You can only delay the moment it rises. And rise it did. Karma, I have learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like a woman who simply refuses to stay, who takes her pain, her documentation, and her dignity and walks out of a door she should never have walked through in the first place. Sometimes karma is not a punishment at all. It's a restoration. I am restored now. I still keep yellow tulips in my kitchen, not because of Daniel. He never deserved the meaning behind them, but because my mother loved them. And because every morning when I see them on the counter, I hear her voice, little sunrise. She was watching. She was always watching. And I truly believe, she is proud. If someone is using your grief against you, it is not love. Love does not exploit your wounds. It sits beside them. Know the difference, and never let anyone turn your softness into their strategy.